So far, we've learned how to use interceptors to bind extra logic before and after method execution, as well as automatically logging and transforming results returned from route handlers. Another technique useful for interceptors is to extend the basic function behavior by applying RxJS operators to the response stream. Let's see this in action with a realistic example. To help us learn about this concept by example, let's imagine that we need to handle timeouts for all of our route requests. When an endpoint does not return anything after a certain period of time, we need to terminate the request and send back an error message. Let's start by generating another interceptor, naming it timeout, and also placing it in the common interceptors folder. Let's open up this newly generated timeout interceptor and add some logic in there. In our example, we want to terminate a request after a specific period of time. So let's use the timeout operator imported from rxjs/operators to achieve this. To demo this easily, let's set a very quick timeout of 3000 milliseconds. This means that when a request is made, after 3 seconds, the request processing will be automatically canceled for us. To test it out, let's bind this second interceptor to our application globally, and since it has no dependencies, we can add this in our main.ts file. So let's add our new timeout interceptor here in our useGlobalInterceptors method. Note that we can actually bind multiple interceptors here simply by separating them with commas. Now, to make sure that our interceptor works properly, let's open up the coffee controller file and temporarily add a setTimeout function in our findAll method to simulate a very long delay. Let's set a timeout for 5 seconds higher than the 3 seconds we set in our interceptor to purposely trigger our timeout interceptor. Perfect. Now let's open up Insomnia and execute this endpoint by making a request for get/coffees. As we can see, after 3 seconds, we received a 500 error, which means our timeout interceptor worked. However, the error message we got back is not really descriptive. It says internal server error, but how could we make this message more user-friendly? Heading back to our timeout interceptor again, let's chain another operator called catchError inside of our pipe method. The RxJS catchError operator allows us to catch all exceptions that occurred within the stream. In the callback function we provide here, we can check if the error thrown is an instance of timeout error, which is also imported from RxJS. If so, we use a utility function throwError from RxJS to create a stream which immediately emits an error for whatever is passed into it. Since we want our error message to be more specific for this scenario, let's use a Nest.js class called requestTimeoutException imported from Nest.js Common, so we can throw the correct error message back to our users, letting them know the request has actually timed out. Great, so let's save our changes, navigate back to Insomnia, and test the endpoint once again. As we can see, this time we received the 408 response with the descriptive message request timeout. So in this lesson, we learned how to add additional superpowers to our interceptors along with some new tricks from RxJS, all which are very common scenarios and helpful in most of our Nest.js applications.